Hey guys, it's Dorr. I got Dave with me here today. And we're going to be going over the top differences in weapons between SEAL Team and Ranger Regiment. Yeah. You know, a lot of times the skill sets and the missions overlap. But, you know, then again, we do have, you know, kind of at our core different missions.
Yeah.
We do use a lot of the same equipment, but it did evolve differently for different reasons.
Yeah.
And we just want to get into it with you, so stay tuned. All right, bud. So, you know, starting off, you know, with a bang here. I like to start things with a bang, if that's okay. And 40 mic. It's been around for quite a while. It went through its evolution, you know, back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Kind of had things finalized by the end of that conflict with the M203.
Yeah.
And having them stuck underneath your M4s, M16s, whatever you want to call it, was pretty much the norm. I mean, how'd you guys run those? How many did you have?
Yeah, we had, you know, a grenadier, you know, per team, you know, would run those initially. But the biggest advancement for us was the ammunition side of the house. You know, when we started using the 40 mic flashbangs, that really opened up that weapon system for us, especially in the GWAT arena for call-outs and stuff. It was a new capability we didn't have. Nothing says wake up the 40 mic flashbang through your window.
On our side, you know, 40 mic, there wasn't a lot of uniformity. It changed like teams, different troops, different platoons. Like you'd have a platoon where every single non-sniper or AW had a 40 mic capability.
Yeah.
Either strapped to their M4 or on their back. And then some units, you know, just used them very sparingly. You'd see them as standalone weapons left in vehicles, or like one guy would grab one and you'd have a backpack ready to go with ammo and a launcher. We did not use the flashbangs overseas. There was a kind of an overarching or universal disdain for less than lethal capability. Our less than lethal was like pistol whipping. You know, I'm serious. Like if they wanted to make effects inside of a structure, I mean, guys would just send it with the golden eggs if need be.
Nothing really says wake up. Like,
yeah.
Like a golden egg through your window.
So, you know, can't be probably as preemptive on every type of target, but some places we're just going to hit first and see who's left over. But yeah, the 40 mic, the flashbangs were definitely cool. I did see guys using the prac rounds overseas as kind of to get rid of crowds, or if we were out in the daytime, because the locals were scared of the orange dust. But there were no WMDs in Iraq. You know, they don't even know what those are.
You guys use on belt feds. You guys run single guys, right? You don't run a gun crew, right?
Yeah, as far as on the AW side, you know, so now we're switching off of the grenadiers. The AW were more deliberate. You know, if you were sending out an element that wasn't like a true assault or CQB mission, you could count on at least one out of every 4 guys would have a belt gun.
Yeah, that's a big difference. Regiment runs, you know, very much like you're a gun crew. Yeah, so there's always going to be a gunner and an assistant gunner, and then occasionally you'll have the ammo bearer added to that.
Yeah,
you know, not very often, but it's task organized that way.
Yeah, man, I was my own ammo bearer. Yeah, so the AWs and the teams are just individual weapon systems, and the guy is running his AW as same as he would any other primary rifle or otherwise. So on 7.62, it was a 500 round loadout. Yeah, and it started with the M60s, you know, in the 60s, and then they revamped that thing. I think we were on our 3rd version, which was called the E4, because the E2 was a solenoid fired vehicle platform. So the E4 lasted, it came out in the 90s, and it lasted, I'd say, till the mid 2000s when the Mark 48s, early mid 2000s, finally took over. And that 48, man, was a huge game changer. The sights were better.
Yeah.
The barrel was better. I mean, it was a more accurate gun. The limitations was the ammo. You know, it's never going to be a 240 as far as, you know, reach and sustainment fire. But, dude, I love that thing. It really was a rifleman's AW.
Pistols were the big difference between us guys, too.
Yeah.
You know, you guys all ran SIGs for the most part, right?
Yeah, so you're not a true Navy SEAL unless you've tasted Italian steel. And I know the guy who had the Beretta slide pop off and take his teeth out.
Yeah.
And I know a guy who was standing right next to him. I've heard both of their versions. And yeah, they were just, when those M9 Berettas first came out, they were testing them out, and they were just shooting them over again, and those slides kept popping off. So the Navy, for whatever reason, wasn't going to wait for them to fix it. They switched right over to SIG right then and there in the mid-'80s, and they never looked back. So, on the Navy side, everything was SIGs, 226s, 228s, 239s eventually, and I love that gun.
Pistol introduction was a big change for regiment, because initially all I had them was, the gun crews, snipers, leadership were the only guys that really had pistols. Mm-hmm. And even then it was just the M9s. So when we filled the pistols across the board, again, it was everybody with M9s, which say what you want. I'm not a huge fan. I've always had them locking blocks break all the time. Mm-hmm. And then, we finally moved to the Glocks, which I still am a huge Glock fan.
Yeah. It's the best-selling handgun for the same reason the AK-47 is the best-selling.
Yeah, it's the original point-and-click interface.
Yeah, it just works, and that's all you really need a gun to do is work.
Yeah.
We also used the 45s from HK. When I first got to the team, they still had those Mark 23 German Desert Eagles laying around, and the only guys that used those really were the recce guys.
Huh?
Because they'd run their, they'd have their sniper rifle, whatever, and that's a semi-auto. If they had a bolt gun, they'd have a primary.
Yeah.
But anytime I needed that niche capability, I went with the MP5s because it's just a better, I don't know, I just couldn't justify the big pistol over something that was just a little bit bigger and had such a better capability.
That's a good segue into, you brought up recce and subs and all that, right? Because the only guys in our side of the house that had a sub or sub capacity or, whatever, was our recce or those guys. The rest of the regiment didn't, don't use subs, but you guys all across the board run them because you have a mission for that.
Yeah. So sub gun culture in the teams was pretty heavy in the 20th century. When the Carl G's were cut off by during the war, during Nam, it was NSW that went to Smith & Wesson and had them make the S&W 76. And that is a badass gun. I wish they still had those things. I never got to shoot one. They were long gone by the time I came in, but they were replaced eventually in the 80s by the MP5s. But that gun was built specifically for us. I had a 32 or so round magazine. I'd only seen one up close once, and that was behind glass. The guys that did use them, and some of my friends, older guys, had an opportunity to use them. But yeah, that eventually in the 80s, you had the standard MP5s, and then the K Kurtz shorties, and then of course the SDs.
Man, you're speaking Greek to me.
Sorry.
When you speak sub stuff, that's so not in our realm. I'm sitting here like a kid, listen, I want to know more.
Yeah, they were kind of on their way out, by the time I came in, but we had that combat diver and that maritime assault, shipboarding mission, and those things are incredible. Coach was telling me he had a squib once, and the next round fired and just pushed the bullet out. Yeah. And it did not damage the gun.
Huh.
The MP5 still functioned just fine. And it was find me another gun that can do that. Yeah. They're a little clunky, a little, the manual arms, of course, was different, but that's okay. It just kind of was what it was. The ends were pretty much phased out by the time I got to the team, but we still had them. And I bust them out and play with them just because I wanted to, but the Ks and the SDs lived on. And anytime we needed those niche capabilities for the low vis stuff, the recce stuff, the shooting out of the lights or whatever, that was definitely our go-to. For me personally, I said earlier, guys did use those Mark 23s, but I never carried one overseas.
Yeah.
I would instantly just go with one of the bigger guns. It just depended on what role I was filling. And eventually, the sevens, obviously, over on the East Coast, the Virginia Beach guys, we're using the sevens, but the 7, as sexy and cool as that gun is, and in American gun culture, it's like this unicorn, it's the ultimate cool guy gun. That bullet sucks. That 4.6 bullet is an anemic travesty. And guys, I know more than one guy who has stitched somebody up only to have them turn around. What are you doing right now? What is that? It's crazy. And in the wintertime, in a place like Afghanistan where they wear really heavy clothing and saddle blanket warmies, those things were having a hard time defeating them.
Yeah. So look at Afghanistan. That's why we started using the SCAR heavies initially.
Yeah.
We all had it. We had to have a 7.62 across the board. That lasted.
Yeah. So, the 7, fun gun to shoot and everything. I didn't get to use it much at all. But the Rattlers replaced the 7s. So the 7s replaced the Ks and the SDs eventually for, out at my teams in the West Coast. But the Rattlers is really a sub gun with that short barrel, that subsonic rounds. You can put the hot rounds in, you can mess around with the barrel length. But the Rattler is kind of the new evolution of a sub gun.
Yeah.
That subsonic round coming out of a 5-inch barrel.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I've heard, from guys that, my friends, that you can get consistent confirmed kills at like 100 yards.
I can see it.
Yeah, and there's no way an SD was ever going to do that. And, that's kind of where we're at now as far as sub guns go. But again, it's kind of that niche, when you need it. You can put on a longer barrel. I think that from what I've heard out in Syria, the 8-inch barrels with supersonic rounds were knocking dudes over at 400 yards. So, that's kind of right in that where the sub becomes the primary assault rifle, whatever the hell you want to call it.
Wasn't the SCAR the end-all be-all for everybody?
The SCAR. The SCAR is a scar. A scar is a scar on our, Coach is going to hate me for saying this, but yeah. I mean, on your guys' side, snipers, are a different breed, a different capability, a different weapon system, but for that niche, mid-range, maybe out to 700-800 for, a rifleman, you're giving up your M4, you're putting down that 5.56, because I'm in regiment and SEAL team, got rid of the M16 just in time for Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Where you needed it, you needed the range. But on our side, when I first came in, every guy had an M14.
Yeah.
There was a big metal case that had M14s for every guy. I didn't use them a whole lot. The M14s went away kind of right as I was coming in.
Did you guys have the EBRs?
Yeah, they gave us EBRs, but like a troop of SEALs, which is like 32, 35 SEALs, you were looking at 6 to 8 EBRs.
Okay.
Now, every sniper had 4 sniper rifles, not counting those EBRs.
Yeah.
And they had their 7.62 Mark 11, which is in the Army is a M110.
Yeah, 110.
Yeah, M110.
The 110 SAS.
Yeah, and then eventually both the M14s, the EBRs, which was kind of the last death throw of the M14, and the 7.62 M110 platforms were all replaced by SCARs.
Yeah.
And the SCARs were a good idea. I don't think they were quite ready for prime time when they came out. They still had some bugs to work out. There is a new version, that has worked out some of that stuff. But I liked the Super SCAR because I was a sniper.
Yeah.
So I had access to the Super SCAR, which is the Mark 20, the longer, even more ridiculously expensive version of the SCAR. And it came with 2 different triggers, a single and dual stage trigger pack. And it was basically the AR lower is just a part on a SCAR. The serialized everything is this receiver, the upper. And so you could just pop the lowers on and off, just like a pistol grip on an AR. And it had 2 different triggers, and they were good triggers. As far I know, some people had issues with them. There were some complaints, but I got issued a brand new one, went through sniper school with it. I think we were the second group to ever do so. And I didn't go through sniper school until about halfway through my career. And I thought, it was a pretty good gun. We used the same Night Force 15 power scopes, but there's a lot of metal moving around in that thing.
Yeah.
Did you guys notice that? I mean, you take it apart and it almost looks like a saw.
Yeah.
On the inside. Like, obviously,
that's a true story.
It's an FN.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to take precision shots, you're trying to take follow-up shots with that thing, and there's just all this metal moving around in it. I definitely did not like that. I would cannibalize those trigger packs and that butt stock off of the big one, and I would just put it on the small ones. So I'd have like a Mark 20 carbine.
Yeah.
I'd throw like a 10 power Night Force on there with a red dot. And as long as the barrels were installed properly, because we were told initially, and the parallels between the rollout of the SCAR and the rollout of the M16 are very similar.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of the biggest letdowns I had in my career, because it was a very mismanaged process, much like it was in the mid-'60s.
I was glad to see him go. I was not butthurt at all to see him go the other way.
Yeah.
Truly wasn't.
Yeah, my Team 7 were the first guys to get them in Afghanistan, and they sent them over to them in country. Bad idea. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And nobody told them that you need to lube this thing like a machine gun.
Oh, really?
It's the same operating system.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying, but no one told them.
Yeah, so they were doing very minuscule lube jobs, and the gun wasn't really working out for them. But again, you know, that's operator error. But honestly, like personally, use on the scars, they were very light. You know, the gun is called a Scar Heavy, and I will give it to you. It was a light gun. And as long as that barrel was installed properly, they were pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, going through sniper school, that you could take headshots at like 1,100 yards. You know, yeah, it's just a silhouette of a head, but art imitates life.
Yeah.
Especially when you're taking them.
Yeah.
And honestly, I thought it was pretty decent for what it was. It was definitely the savings on weight compared to the M14s. I think it was a little bit more balanced. I know the standard butt stocks were a little rinky-dinky and kind of, I was not a fan, but I would use that non-folding Mark 20 butt stock with the cheek weld adjuster, and it was a cool little gun.
I was in the some of the down select for the Scar.
Yeah.
And we were doing them out here in California, and it's like the initial version of the Star butt stock went on from the top to the bottom.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the reason it changed, because when we get out of the vehicle, when we were getting down,
You probably saw Coach.
it popped right off. The stocks were popping off. They fixed it, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why they do the down selects. You know, hey, what's the problem? And they made a material solution.
Yes, he came out here and did the trials.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Coach was NSW's guy.
Okay.
So you guys were probably there together.
I'm sure.
Huh.
Small world.
But yeah, man, from 40 Mike to machine guns to pistols to subs to battle rifles, there's going to be differences. There's going to be a lot of the things we do are the same. Some of the stuff we do is different. So obviously the niche need is going to vary. But I think at the end of the day we were pretty much doing the same thing, especially in GWAT. Not a lot of variance there. And then on the primary weapon side, just the good old M4A1. Thank God you guys were able to get rid of the Scar Light.
No kidding.
Yeah, everybody despised that thing. But I don't know, I still have an M4A1 clone that I use in a lot of videos and I use even in my classes. And I just like shooting it. It's just everything it needs to be and nothing else.
Yeah.
I don't mind it at all. I don't mind the front sight post. I don't mind any of that. Now, I have obviously the other stuff that I use, but I mean, the only thing I really would change on an AR past that is the trigger. Like once you start using those Gucci nice triggers, it's hard to go back.
Yeah, I don't know. When it gets into the AR stuff, we could make that a whole other video.
Yeah. Like
on pros and cons and picks and choices. Because I disagree with you on the front sight post. I absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for that. That's another video. but I don't know. I think this was a good discussion. I like the look of the differences in weapons and how they're utilized between, SEALs and regiment. On some hands they're very similar, but on other hands they're wildly different and differently used. Which again goes differences in Rangers and SEALs. But
yeah, definitely, it's interesting. It's always been interesting to me to see how other units run things, how they do things, because at the end of the day, you're taking and holding ground. The weapon systems, they're tools.
Yeah.
And, the tools are used to take care of a need, a job, whatever it is. And, it is interesting, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Thanks for sticking in, hanging in there with us. That's just a quick talk about just the two different ways, you see things on the blue Navy side, green Army side. There'll be more talks like this in the future. So see you next time. Thanks for being here. This is Dorr. Dave out.